Frankenstein's monster is subject to the most basic human instincts. He's almost imprisoned by them. But the real question is, how much are we as humans affected by our own human instincts? Today we review and compare two movies that shed light on a man that created one of the most infamous and famous monsters of all time, and also depicts the gruesome acts Doctor Frankenstein committed. But first we're going to look at one of the most earliest adaptations called The Horror of Frankenstein. As I said, we're going to review The Horror of Frankenstein from 1970 first. Doctor Frankenstein is played by a guy called Ralph Bates, and is a kind of semi-parody / remake of the 1957 The Curse of Frankenstein. And of course, both of these movies were produced by none other than Hammer Horror. And The Horror of Frankenstein really kind of gets into the backstory of Doctor Frankenstein himself. He's depicted as this kind of charming sociopath who kills anybody in his way, who is going to prevent him performing his experiments and, creating his monster. And even when he creates his monster, he gets his own monster to do some really evil deeds for him. What's unique about this movie? Dr. Frankenstein himself, he has his own acid bath. Well, if you can imagine collecting all these human remains to try and build this perfect creature, this Frankenstein's monster, you're probably going to end up with a lot of surplus parts that are not quite up to scratch. And this is the case in the movie. It's quite a gruesome and gory moment of the film when you actually think about it. Another interesting scene in the film is when he's planning out his monster on like a chalkboard or a drawing. He's numbering the parts by numbers like you would assemble a flat pack furniture, say. And there's a moment in the film when he's looking at this other gentleman. Let's say he wants a part for a head. He'll view the person with the number already written on their forehead, like he's planning ahead, and that kind of shows his intention for that person. Again, this is a quite creepy moment because he's planning and thinking how he's going to get all these body parts. So now let's jump 45 years into the future and leave the 1970s behind, and let's see what new adaptations contemporary horror has to offer. So yeah, this is Victor Frankenstein from 2015. Dr. Frankenstein in this movie is played by James McAvoy, but the movie is interestingly told from Igor's point of view. So it kind of sheds more light on Dr. Frankenstein's sidekick rather than Dr. Frankenstein himself. In the beginning, it shows Igor as a part of like a circus freak show. I'm not going to tell you the plot because I really hate spoiling movies for people, but basically it begins with Igor in a kind of circus freak show. Sadly, the rest of the movie is a little bit predictable at times. One of the first monsters he brings back from the dead is a monkey. This part I really loved. I thought it was a really creative moment to see this monkey, a zombified monkey. This was a really, really good creative horror aspect of the movie. So in this final analysis, I wanted just to compare the monsters. The movies are based on Dr. Frankenstein and Igor, but I want to shed some light on the monsters themselves. This is the monster from The Horror of Frankenstein, the 1970s Hammer Horror film. And this monster is interestingly from Van Helsing, and if you've not noticed, the key differences between the Horror of Frankenstein monster and the Van Helsing monster is that it has these kind of like steampunk, almost machine-like limbs and like green glowing orbs and panels on his head and his chest. And I found that again a really unique kind of addition to the Frankenstein monster. Now let's look at the Victor Frankenstein monster in the film. If you put them all side by side, you can clearly see similar resemblance between all these monsters. You can see the adaptations and how they've inspired each other, because don't forget, in The Horror of Frankenstein, Hammer Horror had to stay clear of the Universal Frankenstein because of legal issues. So as you can see from all these examples, the movies are about the person, not the monster, and maybe in some respects, the person in these films is actually the monster, not the monster itself. And I think when you look at it that way, these movies mean quite a lot to the horror genre, and not only horror, it means quite a lot to Frankenstein itself, since that Frankenstein is the doctor and he makes the monster. So, as always guys, thanks for watching. Please comment below if you've seen any of these movies. I recommend them both. go and watch them. They're an experience in themselves. And as always guys, thanks for watching.